Should you rush through Starfield's main story? No. Also, here's a short disclaimer. Do you want to mainline Starfield? Enjoy yourself, have a great time. Everyone should play the way they want. That's sort of the deal. It's a sandbox. However, someone who's beat it and continued playing it since review, let me explain why I think that may detract from the game itself. And I'm going to keep this as spoiler-free as possible. Subscribe and comment for the algo. The first 2,000 people who comment will be listed in the first 2,000 comments on YouTube. It's your time to shine. If you're playing the game, what do you think? If you're not, what are you playing? And what do you think of whatever that game is? I want to know. We'll talk about all this in the podcast as well. So the story so far. As the reviews went out, I started being told that it was going around that the best way to play Starfield was to just mainline the main story, get to the end and the New Game Plus, and ignore a lot of the other activities. I was a bit puzzled by this. That didn't really make any sense. And the people I was talking to after the embargo, 4 of which had done pretty much that, found their experiences lacking and had somewhat wished they hadn't done it. First, I kind of hate that crap. You play the game you want, even regardless of what I'm saying here. But let's discuss with some examples of why I think that's not the greatest idea. Remembering that this is a sandbox game, so how they present the story, even the main one, will involve player interaction, as well as the balance between interests, main story, side stories, minigames, and other activities, and how you, as a player, handle them. Looking at a plot curve, for instance, you have the introduction and the exposition, setting the mood. Introduction to the initial characters, explaining the world you'll be exploring, and in Starfield, getting out of that boring-ass mine right away. Thankfully, the game mets out that somewhat quickly into the rolling start of Starfield, getting your first ship and blasting off. The introduction isn't super long, but the remaining exposition itself can be, depending on the party members you pick up and take with you, as many of them have direct interactions with the main story that leads into their own side stories and weaves between the two, as well as you begin to work on relations with them or the factions within the game or other secretive groups, or just travel around. The next is conflict. Everything I discussed before starts early in Starfield, and so does conflict. Why? Notably, conflict in games is a bit like conflict in many new action movies. It's set up front-facing, leaning against exposition like two drunken buddies exchanging stories, and the story just keeps getting larger and larger. More experiences mean more information about the conflict. More conflict means more nuanced information about the experience, and new enemies or conflicts are consistently introduced. But more importantly, in sandbox games, they're created by the player's interactions and the simulation of the title. That's one of the most important parts, is you carry those ideas into New Game Plus. While some things change, it's your knowledge and experience, and not exactly Starfield, that tells you a great deal about those conflicts. Some of the best conflicts in this game are the ones where the player creates them themselves, either real or just assumed, directly drawn out in the narrative or hinted by some suspiciously friendly bounty hunter ringing you up to make sure you're okay because they want to make sure you're not okay later on. Additionally, the main conflict may involve a nemesis of some kind, some mysterious main enemy. It's also interactive fiction, meaning many players are going to gravitate towards a lack of knowledge as their nemesis in the start, the general state of lawlessness perhaps, getting straight paid, helping random explorers, and more. Depends on the stories and the player bouncing off of them with their own interactions with the simulation to create the full experience. In Starfield, the side stories can draw you into caring or not caring about the world, the factions, characters, or just yourself. They're somewhat vital even to the first playthrough, but it can be argued even more so in New Game Plus. All of that takes time. Conflict alone is just chaos, and conflict with cause is experience. That's why this isn't an arcade space shooter. Let's move on to climax, the most exciting part where the things come to a head, where the general crux of the main plot is resolved and where loose ends get tied up in a combination with the next section of falling action. Or, in the case of Lord of the Rings trilogy, Frodo taking 24 hours of real time to say goodbye to everybody. Seriously, Frodo, just leave. And New Game Plus comes at this time. That's a general curve of a story. Do you know what a curve is with no curve? It's just a flat line. Do you know what a gentle curve is if it's compacted and slammed and compressed up against the front? That's something where real excitement begins to fade away after the initial bump. The curve of narrative, without even coming to the interaction, especially with what Bethesda explains is a sandbox exploration title and all the toys in that sandbox, has a tendency to lack the connective tissue of the strands of the story. The, oh wow, I did this randomly. I ran into this character on my way over here that I didn't expect. That's sandbox games, and that's what they're known for. Now let me explain a bit about this. New Game Plus is additive to the game. If you don't experience much or any of the real simulation, then there's very little to add. The comparison of normalcy versus the new isn't there. Versus perhaps playing the game normally, where you play and then at some point you think to yourself, I want to wrap up the story, and you do, and then you dive into New Game Plus and you see the changes and you're like, wow, what is changed? What's different? This is going to feel unique. And that curve continues to spread out and continues to keep the actual interest high. That oh wow moment there isn't plowed through. It's not going to be behind you, lodged in the early section, as if someone took the climax of the story and somehow thrust it into the very start. For comparison's sake, it's a little bit like playing one down in your first Super Bowl. You got it. You did the thing. You got the ring. It's an event, and you get to go back. But it won't be the same as if you played the better experience, which was being fully immersed in the game, experiencing all the downs you can and as many as you can that can round out a full fleshed out experience that you can then build on in later successes and compare to. And that's why, to me, the first playthrough is intrinsic in feeling that emotional impact of the second playthrough, the experiences of being normal and then New Game Plus. Without the plus, well, doesn't let you compare anything. Otherwise, it's just New Game Plus. Interestingly, Bethesda stated this is a simulation title, an open world, open solar system RPG. So the idea of rushing through it is already a little surprising to me. But like all sandboxes, it does have a hidden cat turd or two in there. Shortchanging the good on purpose, though, without it being a natural way you personally are enjoying the game, could easily lead to a curveball at the end. Do you need to rush to finish? No, I don't think so. Lastly, the N+ game basically restarts the game. We've seen this with many Dark Souls titles and other similarly styled titles where that's sort of a common thought process. We can dive into this later, but I want to discuss something here. Starfield is assuredly not a game that only starts at NG+. With 40 to 50 hours behind you, that would be the worst kind of game, or let's get good after 40 hours, which isn't the best kind of experience any gamer wants. Instead, Starfield's about change over time, and time changes. And without the amount of narrative experience and memory of that time spent, the exciting change may mean a good deal less to a lot of gamers. I mean, New Game Plus literally means New Game Plus, which is starting a new game plus something. If you didn't experience much of the original, something that you don't even know was there, you won't even know if it's new. And that's where the comparison begins to fail. I love the idea of playing any game you want. That's the way it should be. So if you want to rush this, enjoy those starfaring moments if you like this game. If you don't, play something else. However, my overall opinion is that you need to rush it, or it's better if you rush it, isn't sound advice. It's a personal opinion that point for point feels easy to bring down as a suggestion and fairly easy to lodge solid arguments against, both within the frame of a sandbox spacefaring game, but just in particular to Starfield itself. Oh, look. I'm repeating myself, so I am done. Subscribe. It helps huge. I want to know what you guys think of Starfield if you're playing it. If you haven't played it and you're playing something else, I would love to know what you guys are playing, what you're enjoying. 2023 is just spectacular. It's unbelievable in the amount of titles we have. Even if you don't like some of them, there's things coming ahead that just look incredible. Alan Wake, of course, we've already had Baldur's Gate, but you've also got Spider-Man, Forza. There's just a bunch of stuff that is coming and already come for 2023. It's one of the highlight years for me. That's another thing I wanted to know what you guys think about highlight years. It's been surprising to me as somebody who's been into gaming for so many years. There's been occasional years that were stunning, like Microsoft's 3Bs, where they had BioWare, Bungie, and Bazaar. But we've also had years where there's been a Final Fantasy with another massive RPG, just all these different years. What's your favorite gaming year? I'd like to know about that too. And look, you're here at the end of the video. Watch one of them. I have reviews, podcasts. You can see them here on the cards. I even do the Walking the Walk series where I discuss making games with developer input and what makes amazing open world games, well, yeah, amazing. Stay tuned for exclusive Forza, Spider-Man 2, Alan Wake 2, Alone in the Dark, and more content. Gang, gang.